Hi there. I'm so glad you're here. Here's what you'll gain by listening to the very last second of this conversation with Dr. Hasten Moon. Through my conversation with Dr. Moon, you'll learn why her dialogic orientation quadrant model provides a powerful framework for transforming conversations by helping us navigate between troubled pasts and dreaded futures toward resourceful pasts and preferred futures, ultimately creating more meaningful and productive dialogue in polarized environments. You'll leave the conversation understanding why the DOQ model maps conversations along two axes, why effective dialogue requires acknowledging without exploring negative quadrants, and why finding calibration points in polarized conversations creates connection. Stay with us. I'm so happy to have you join our conversation. This is Solutions Coaching and Teaching Strategies, the podcast that extends education beyond the classroom. A show that offers educators and caregivers strategies to try right away and ensure every student receives the inspiration and support they need to thrive. I am Olivia Wall, and I am humbled to welcome Dr. Hasten Moon to the podcast. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Moon. Dr. Moon is a leading expert and educator on evidence-based coaching and the use of language in transforming workplace dialogues. As a Harvard faculty member at the Institute of Coaching, she has authored both academic books and practice-oriented manuals for dialogic intelligence. Our conversation today will focus on her simple coaching model, the Dialogic Orientation Quadrant, or DOQ, that has transformed the way people coach and learn coaching worldwide. Dr. Moon, this is a moment in time I have been looking forward to for months. I carry your book of joy and goodness with me everywhere I can. I've bought multiple copies for friends and colleagues. This is for another conversation, but I do want to put it out there for folks. Coaching A to Z, it's one of my favorites. I really feel like this is a time in history where your model could be used in a myriad of ways to foster dialogue and conversation in the most polarized places. So I'm so honored to welcome you today.
Thank you so much for actually inviting me. And I think, as you say, the time and space that we are in right now, I find it strangely relevant. I wish it was not as relevant, right? But it's strangely relevant, and it's not nice to have. It's actually quite it's critical
Yeah.
that we hold those conversations. And I guess for me, I really want to see people having more conversations, but not just more, but have them better.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's a perfect time to
Perfect
do that.
time. It is a perfect time. I wanted to ask you, you steep your work. You are a researcher, and all of this work around dialogue and conversation, it's based in history, it's based in research. Who is a researcher, or what is a piece of research that you lean on often when it comes to dialogic conversation?
Piece of research or a researcher that I always go back to.
Yeah.
There are a few, but definitely I can say it's Janet Bavelas. And she's been publishing for more than 50 years, and she just passed away a couple of years ago. But she does what we call pragmatics or microanalysis of face-to-face dialogue. She's a researcher and like a living history who was doing actual research and also making it so practical for people. So, and her precision of language is just, when you read her article, any of her articles, there's not even a single word that you can remove or add. It's how it's written. Yeah, so Jan Beveles would be the person that I would say. No questions, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So take us to the moment where is it a challenge? What caused you, or what inspired you to create the DOQ model?
You know, this model is it came out of necessity. So I was teaching solution focused coaching and different ways of listening. And because solution focused coaching, like any other good coaching should be, it's not about asking questions. So many times people memorize, oh, so what's the good question to ask? There's no such thing
Yeah.
really. So when I was teaching coaching as listening, you have to listen precisely and productively. What does that mean? And I was teaching, I think this was back in 2007, 15, 16, I would like to say. I was teaching in China and I'm Korean, so I don't know the language at all. And I was teaching in English, and there's an interpreter who she's an excellent interpreter. She not only translates but then context. So she's excellent. But it was during break time, so she had to go to the bathroom. And then I'm in the room, and in Asia, I find that break time actually means that you come to the professor and ask questions. They don't like take a break. They're
Oh, that's
working.
so scary.
So,
Yeah.
and I was just sitting, and I was just standing right by my like whiteboard when I was talking about this. And one gentleman actually came up to me and he said, "I'm sorry, I don't speak English." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't speak Chinese. We can't really communicate." But then he's like, "Oh, we're looking for the translator," but she went to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And he said, "So what is it?" And then we were limited in the language that we can use. So then I was trying to make it as simple so that I can use the simplest language that we can both understand. And then I said, "Well, it's about listening." He's like, "Yeah, I get it. What do you listen for?" I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of like this." And then I remember that moment very vividly, that I was like, it's kind of like this. It's like people tell you something that happened in the past, something that happened in the future. And he's like, yeah, 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 yeah. Those are the words that we know, past,
Yes.
future. And then I said, up there is good, bad. He's like, oh, okay, okay. So I just remember that was the first iteration is a quadrant of a horizontal line from left to right is past to future. And he knew those words. I even know that in Chinese, right?
Yes.
So then top to bottom is like good and bad or good and not good. And he's like, oh, I get it. So then we had this quadrant, and I said, so whole idea of solution focused is um, like getting people to talk more about top
Yeah.
areas. And he got it. And I mean, since then, the model actually has changed quite a bit so that we actually do talk about all four quadrants and the names have changed. But that's how it came up. When we didn't have interpreter, we really connected to that common language that we can hold on to. And that's why it's so simple. Because it was really, because I didn't know how to translate. And he got it and I got it. Yeah, this is it. So that's the very first moment it came
I
up.
love it. I love it.
Isn't it
It
sweet?
is sweet. It is. And I think it's also, it goes back to the preciseness that you spoke of, and that we don't always need many words to explain. We need that common language, that shared understanding. So help us now understand. Can you break down what are the four quadrants? Can you go into depth a little bit more, the different elements?
I think that shared meaning making or that accumulation of shared meaning is quite interesting, even with this quadrant.
Yeah.
So initially, I called it past to future and then like good and not good. But then I realized that when you listen to somebody's narrative and we decide good or not good, then we're making value judgment here. So then, how do we stick really close to the client's language? And then it occurred to me, so this is like 7 iterations later. Now, what it looks like is on the top is when clients say, or anybody, when they say they want more. It's not good, but it's something that they say that they want more. Bottom is something that they say that they want less. And you can actually track their language this way because it's about I hope to see this, or I'm really hoping, I wish that I would like to. Those are all want more.
Yes.
Oh, I'm just kind of dreading. These are all one less, and sticking very close to the language of the client. And then when we put them together, like timeline and preference line, and I decided to call it preference. And quadrant one, which is top right corner, becomes something that people tell you that they want in the future. It's not perfect future, but they prefer to see that. It would be my preference, and that's called preferred future. And then top left is past, your experience, thoughts, interactions, and kind of feelings and all those things that you have experienced, whether directly or even vicariously, and something that was in the direction of your preference, and that is called resourceful past.
Yes.
And what's most common that people usually, when they start to talk about something when not prompted, often humans talk about the bottom quadrants, which is bottom left corner will be something that happened that was not my preference. And people usually call it like complaints or like,
Yes.
they're complaining or regrets, guilt, shame, all of those that happened in the past that was not your preference, whether you caused it or you're part of it or it's something was done on you. But still, we call it, even the names changed. Initially, I called it like, um, let's call it traumatic past and then or regretful past, and people are like, sure, it worked for a little bit, but then some people are like, well, it's not just regret and it's not necessarily trauma. So then I decided to call it troubled past, where a lot of other people can connect to that idea because everyone has it.
Yes.
If I ask you about, Olivia, what's your trauma, it's kind of like whereas I can say,
Right.
yeah, tell me a little bit about your troubled past. It's a lot lighter,
It is.
right?
It is more
And
accessible.
then last one is the, which one, lower right corner, is where people will tell you something that might happen that they're not looking forward to. So then it's not, some people call it fear, and actually for a little bit I called it fearful future as well. But then somebody said it's not really a fear, but it's more of a worry, and it's different. It's like, oh, that's different for you.
Yeah.
Okay, how is it different? But anxiety lives there, and so then that quadrant is called dreaded future. It's simple dread. In English, dread is better than fear, but then in other languages that I'm told that dread is much worse than
Ah,
fear. And then out of necessity, some people started to say, what about the now? What about the present moment? So then I had to define it as because this is not just it's not a coaching model, but it's more of a heuristic of interaction.
yes.
So when we use it as a research tool, we have to now operationalize. So now is defined as the time and space you and I have together in the middle.
Yes.
So that's actually called quadrant zero. So that's the model, so to speak.
Yes. Well, and I appreciate too how it's evolved and that you're able to name all of the different iterations. And what I appreciate most is that it's based on feedback. And so there's this
Hmm.
beautiful feedback loop that our work can morph and change based on the people we're in conversation with. And that's something that I think is needed now tremendously because we are so polarized that it's hard to even see the possibility of change or understanding someone that has a very, very different viewpoint. And I said to you before we jumped on to record that what I'm learning more and more is that when we can settle in on the complexities of issues, that can serve as common ground to begin these conversations around, what is your perspective? We seem to very much disagree, but what are some of the complexities so I can better understand where you may be coming from?
Hmm.
And I recently had a conversation with Dr. Katie Anthes. She was the commissioner of education in Colorado for 7 years. And she said something that I continue to think about, that we all want to be understood so deeply. That is what most of us are striving for. And so I think of, conversations, and you just said this is not strictly a coaching model necessarily. So I guess another question I have is when you're in conversation, whether it's with a coach or with a client, how do you help them identify where people are within the DOQ model? Are there indicators of conversation?
When you just spoke about this seemingly disagreeing parts of people's narratives, and I find that fascinating to study. Because, so for example, if we had a list of 10 things, you and I very likely will agree on maybe 7 out of 10. But then there are three that we might be like, what? You think what?
Yes.
Okay. So then, in a way, we did this experiment. I actually had a personal experience of posting something on Facebook back a few years back when we're in the heat of COVID, and I was so annoyed with these people who refused to be vaccinated and all of that. And I posted something, and I was like, "Oh, if this was not for these anti-vaxxers, and we can travel again." And then one of my close friends responded, saying, "I am not sure how to take this. I didn't get vaccinated. I didn't vaccinate my kids because I have this fear." And then I'm like, what?
Yeah.
How could you? What's wrong? That was my first response. Like, what's wrong with you? Are you kidding? Like, there's a science. And so I have this my own
Yeah.
narrative. And then I realized that this is my close friend that I cannot believe that she doesn't agree with me on this real, like, essential issue. And I'm a scientist. And then I decided to, you know what? Look, why don't we have a conversation about this?
Yes.
Because I love you and I respect you so much that I want to hear your perspective on this. I cannot agree with you. I will never agree with you on this, but I want to hear your perspective. Now, then, what happens is in coaching too, that we are looking for this moment we call calibration that happens all the time, also known as common grounding, but it's a lot more um, continuous and precise to call it calibration.
Yeah.
Because when I was talking to my friend, we realized that I get vaccinated because of fear. She doesn't get vaccinated because of fear.
That's fascinating.
And then we actually had this fear as something that we can calibrate on. So then that it's not about doing it or not doing it versus we're all afraid actually.
Yeah.
Because the unknown is, I'm frightened by it. That's why I get vaccinated, because I want to protect my mom. And she had exactly the same response. I am terrified. Now then, we can agree so closely on this idea that we are all scared of what we don't know. And that conversation not only saved the relationship, but it got stronger. And how do we have that kind of conversation with somebody so close to me that how could you support that? And I wonder how that plays out in a lot of American homes where there's this, like from outside, it looks so um strange that people are either this color or that color. And I'm like, how does that even work? But I wonder about those conversations that people must be having. And in coaching conversation, how do we know? There are some cues that people say that when we listen to clients' language, and I tell coach students and coaches all the time that you should be able to answer this question at any given point in your coaching. And this one question, if you don't have an answer to it, then probably you need to recenter. Right?
I need to know the
Question is,
question.
yeah, the question is, at any given point in your conversation with your client or student, what did I hear they say that they want? If you don't have an answer to that, you are not listening. And if you don't have an answer to that, then you need to really navigate the conversation in that direction. What did I hear that they say that they want? If you don't have that information, where are you going?
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so we know that those are the cues that I know that where's the client? Well, they will tell you if you're listening, because it's like it helps us to listen more precisely.
They will. And here's the conundrum I face though. Sometimes when we're saying client is a bigger umbrella, sometimes within a school district, the leadership may say, I can very precisely listen, and they may say something that they want. And then when I am with coaches that work for that school district, they say very different things that they want. And so, what I find challenging with the coaching work is finding the calibration point that centers on children. And that's often where we center ourselves because they could be
Yes.
very different. But it's a challenge, right, to listen to the individual and within a body of an organization. I find that the work that we do.
Hmm. And that speaks to team coaching that I do a lot more than individual coaching because I find individual coaching, people see it more as a tools for a breakthrough.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I get coached so that. But then, same leaders who come for one-on-one coaching, they go back to their work and kind of the progress is not. I see them struggle with the same issue, same topic, same environment because nothing else changed around them.
Yes.
So I see team coaching to be much more, or whole school approach to be much more efficient and effective than individual person going for coaching. So in a team coaching or team setting, what happens is you are not going for answers or breakthroughs, but you're going for a relational shift.
Yes.
You're getting people to talk about or talk with one another the way that they always wanted to. So it's team coaching is navigating or sort of balancing or calibrating a lot of collective perspectives into a shared understanding. I think that's so
It
powerful when
is.
you do that,
It is. I
right?
agree.
Especially when you're building on or centering on children,
Yes.
because that's probably everyone can say yes to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, what a great building place.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's hopefully, if I'm serving school districts, that should be the center of our hearts, that all of the ripple or all the layers come out of. And what we've done, we've used different protocols, but most of them center on starting with our hopes for children and then how we can have the parallel practices that model what we dream of for children in the future with
Right.
our resourceful past as well alongside.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think that that's fascinating. And then, what specific techniques can you offer that can help practitioners become more intentional with their language and dialogue?
So here's what I usually see people do with this information. So people usually think, okay, so now we have to orient our conversation to quadrant 1 and 2. So we're going to like, 3 and 4. Oh, no, 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 we're not going to go
Yeah.
there. And then quadrant 1 and 2. Now, in practice, that's going to be quite annoying.
Mhm.
So imagine you're going through some tough time. They're like, yeah, but look at the bright side.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what?
No.
You are so
Yeah.
annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I personally experienced it in a deeper sense of rage when somebody told me as I was grieving my father's death. And for those listeners who are listening to this and people who are going through grief, grief is something that's so private and public at the same time.
Yes.
It's utterly private. And it's almost like grief is it's like you are walking in landmines and you don't know when that landmine of memory just poof, and then you're fine 5 seconds ago, now you're like weeping, you're on the floor.
Yes.
So grief is so different for everyone, but also it's so public. So when I was going through grief, that 8 months mark was a weird time because around then you kind of start to doubt. It's like, is it okay? I'm still grieving. It's like, what kind of social pressure that you internalize and put on yourself? No one is expecting, but you're like, it's already been 8 months. Do I still talk about it? Is it okay? I mean, why am I not better? So then I actually went to see a therapist, and therapist said, so when will be a good time to move on from this?
Ah.
Now, I know if we were to analyze it using the quadrant, sure, you're trying to move to quadrant 1, and that was the most disrespectful
Yeah.
and violent act to somebody who's grieving. And that's how I experienced it, Olivia, that questions are intrusive. questions are by design intrusive because you are adding your assumptions, you're embedding your presuppositions in your questions, and you're kind of like explicitly request that you answer it.
Yes,
That's intrusive.
it is.
So it is very intrusive, and you feel it when the more sensitive the topic, you will feel it. So I think technique, if we can call it a technique, is when you hear content in quadrant 3 and 4, do not ignore it, but do not explore it. So what we call is you need to acknowledge. Unless you acknowledge it, they will repeat. They will come back to it until they feel that you heard it. Calibration. So we usually, when I study therapy or coaching conversations for those who are seasoned practitioners, they do this like a textbook case. They almost always make a statement about quadrant 3 or 4. They might say, "Wow, that sounds really difficult," or they might like, "Oh, yeah, wouldn't that be? Yeah, I can understand why you feel that way for sure." But then they don't end there, because if you actually end at making a statement, their attention will go there, and it will have a function of exploring. So seasoned practitioners always make a statement, but then they add a question that is orienting their attention to quadrant 1 or 2. For example, it sounds like a horrible experience that you have to go through that. The client says yes, sign of calibration, right? Yes. And then the person will say, "So how did you cope with all of that?" Now, the person didn't say, "Tell me more about that," or "How did that make you feel?" That will be horrible exploration,
Yes.
intrusive, right? But if you say, "It sounds like a horrible experience, and how did you manage all of that?" Now that's a very different orientation. So as a skill, that's what we observe in seasoned practitioners. If they are preserving quadrant 3 and 4, we almost always see this question that is added to it, that is redirecting. We call it resource activation. So we see the resource activation always happening after that. And and sometimes we don't use questions a lot, actually. A lot of seasoned practitioners, they use statements very usefully. So if somebody's talking about, you can map it on 1, 2, 3, 4, quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you're going to just use the statement, people do something like this. They simply preserve from what they heard and say, "So clearly, you've been thinking a lot about this. So, like, when you mentioned about this ideal way of interacting with your spouse, I mean, wouldn't that be nice?" So you're just preserving what they just said. And then they will just go there as if you just asked the question. So that's a very sophisticated skill that I think is not that complicated, but it requires us to make intentional and attentional choice in a real-time situation, right?
You just
So
rocked
I
my
would
world.
say,
You just like blew my mind. I'm processing everything you're saying. I just am like, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
yeah, but it's really, that's not it's not a too complicated, but I think we sort of get lazy in listening.
Yes.
And especially, Olivia, when I look at coaching tapes, I know when people have no idea what they can say next. Because you know why? Because this is when a lot of practitioners say, "Tell me more."
And you can also watch on their face almost that the listening stumbling blocks. I've been studying a
Yeah,
lot
tell me
around
more.
tell me more, or the idea of the me too, or the predictor. And so they're already ready to throw a question or a fix it strategy at that person. And what I find so refreshing, I'm processing everything you just shared because it is such a lovely way to interact. It feels so in the moment with whoever is sharing. And I really appreciate the idea of the how did you make it through that situation, or even just adding a statement onto it. A lot of my coaching background was don't ever ask a question that you already know the answer to, which sits in that premise of judgment that we're trying to avoid. This, in my mind, is next level, though. Again, it may feel simple to you who just eloquently explained it in a beautiful, with lots of examples. And yet, I think people that are listening can find this so empowering in all dialogues that they're having, whether it's with a child, whether it's with a partner, whether it's with a teacher or coach. So I am so grateful that you just shared those different techniques. I think it's very powerful.
Olivia, that just reminds me that right now in our time, there must be a lot of educators and parents who may have this sense of dread
Yeah.
of unknown and the unknown and the dread, and often also in our personal lives too, that we carry the sense of dread all the time. And the whole idea of we are way more skilled at detecting threat and dread and trouble and like three times negativity bias, and we're trying to be like, oh, don't go there, don't go there. Well, that's not the point, but how we go there. So for example, you will meet a lot of educators, students who speak about quadrant 4, the dreaded future. Now, instead of like, how do we have conversations about that when somebody's telling you, I am so scared to, I don't know, I'm dreading. And often I see people making this mistake of, you try to prevent it. Now, preventing it is not that effective,
No.
but it's not about prevention, it's about preparation, knowing that it will happen. But also, when I am sitting down one on one and people tell me they're dreading something happening to their home, their parents, their children, their school, and we hear it as dread, then it's hard to get out of it. But what I hear is, you are dreading losing something that you really care about. So then, oftentimes, my inquiry is not about why are you so afraid? I never ask that. But I will say clearly, this is something so important to you that you're trying to protect. So, what are you trying to protect here? What is it that you don't want to lose? Now, whole conversation becomes about their value, not their fears,
Yes.
right? So then it's not really slight change in your words will make that direction, like orientation slightly changes. And then over the next like 10 minutes, your conversation goes in that direction, and that's a completely different story. Yeah.
That's
So
beautiful.
yeah, it's fun to watch that happening in real time.
I go on walks every Sunday with my younger son, and I find that children, especially my own children, talk a lot more when we're walking or when we're driving in a car. And what's fascinating is that a lot of dialogue is framed that you have to be face to face with someone to see their cues. And yet I find children open up a lot more when you're side by side. And
Yes.
we talk, and my younger son opens up on our walks, and he talks about so many things that are on his mind from A to Z. And it's fascinating for him to share things he's concerned with or that he's worried about, and other things that are happening to other people in the world. And he asks many, many questions. I am excited, though, to think when he does express worry, now I know as a caregiver, I can ground that conversation in myself processing what is he actually trying to protect? Is it
Yeah.
that he's going to perform a trumpet solo and he's scared of not getting a perfect score? Like, what is he actually holding on to protect? That's a fascinating way to look at this and to frame it for him as well. I think as a child, so much of this work, I think we would have a much more hopeful future if we did this work with children. And I know your work focuses on grown-ups, but I see the ripple effects of this to be profound. I really do.
We are hosting this conference called TLC, Teaching, Learning, and Coaching with a Jim Knight in Toronto in about 3 weeks' time. And that's with a lot of school educators. And there's a saying that if we do this in schools today, really within next 5 to 10 years, we have a different society.
We do. We will.
And it's really, we do, because your younger son, who's seventh grade, you
Yes.
said? And now imagine in 10 years, now he will be in that working age and who has this influence. And now we're not talking about 100
No,
years. We are talking about 7 to 10
it's so
years. If we
possible.
invest in skills today, 7 to 10 years, we can expect a completely different society.
This is so exciting. I actually am going to be in conversation with Jim on Friday, and I
Ah,
am thrilled about that. And so I'll have to share that, this idea, there's so much hope. There's so much possibility. And we must model this as adults and grown-ups. So what new frontiers do you see that this could be powerful in exploring?
I thought about that, and I think I see it already happening in research front a lot. That people are using this in research. People are using this for team coaching and supervision and training. But I personally got very interested. I've been always interested, but looking at political rhetoric using not just this model, but semiotics and pragmatics. And those are two sort of genre of linguistics. And when we are studying the situation that we're in, the political situation the whole world is in right now, and not just one country, but several different countries, we live in, especially in the day and age of social media, we are talking about semiotic warfare. It's not no longer like just gun and axe and sword warfare. It's semiotic, how we say stuff, how we actually set the agenda, how we move the window of acceptance from conspiracy. One day it was conspiracy, and then the next day we wake up to this is now being talked about at courts and now becomes policy. Who'd have thought that women's rights and all those things are once again questioned in court because somebody moved that window? That's now semiotic warfare. So for me, I would love to see people using this to awaken other people's understanding, because you can track
Yes.
not only what the conversation is, but what the conversation does. So looking at it from both semiotics but pragmatics perspective, I think that's definitely a very necessary area that we need to pay attention to.
This has been one of the most illuminating conversations I've had in a long time. And I find you as a practitioner, as a researcher, as a scientist, so so profound, and the way that you are very precise with your explanation. um, it's very calming because I think it's actually doable. It's so real and authentic. And what I'm very grateful for in this conversation is that you offered a beautiful myriad of examples that we can use to ground ourselves when the work gets hard, when we feel like we're stuck, and we can go back to the moments in this conversation to say, wait, I remember Dr. Moon offered this small pivot, this change that can really redirect the evolution of conversation. So I'm very grateful for your work.
And Olivia, that's the thing. The conversation piece is that we are surrounded by it.
Yes.
And the choice is, do we surround ourselves with what tire us out? That fear, that all those different things. But do we have a choice of surrounding ourselves with those conversations that can actually give hope?
Yes.
Not just to us, but share hope with other people. And conversation as a word in 14th century, it meant dwelling place, your address. And I think it's metaphorically so true. It's like, what's your conversation actually meant? What's your address? And I think we still very much metaphorically, that's our address. Where do we live? And which quadrant do you live? Where do you wake up to? And where would you like to be at? And I think when you find yourself surrounded and tired of this news, you have a choice to make, intentional and attentional choice to make. And I think that's very likely, as you say, it's doable. And I think we can actually start doing it today.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Yes, thank you.
Take care. Solutions Coaching and Teaching Strategies is created, produced, and edited by me, Olivia Wall. Thank you to my older son, Benjamin, who created the music playing in the background. You can follow and listen to Solutions wherever you get your podcasts, or subscribe to never miss an episode and watch on YouTube. Thank you to my guest, Dr. Hae-Sun Moon, for sharing how we can nurture classroom communities where adults and children have more meaningful and productive dialogue, even in polarized environments. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email at solutionspodcast@gmail.com. Let me know what resonated most from my conversation with Dr. Moon. Tune in every Monday for the best research-backed coaching and teaching strategies you can apply right away to better the lives of the children in your care. And stay tuned for my bonus episodes every Friday, where I'll reflect and share connections to what I learned from the guests that week. See you then.